Lots of questions. And for those that are not familiar with how Zoom runs, there's unfortunately, we can't stop it, a confusion. You have two streams in which questions pop up, either the questions and answers button or the chat button. I have been watching both, and I'll try and concatenate all that. Okay. And you can also vote on which question you would like to have answered. This is a fairly recent function. So if you wish, you can open up, if you haven't done so, your questions and answer button on that black control bar, and eventually scan through the questions and vote on them. So that will influence the way we do it. But on purpose, I've been watching how votes have come in. On purpose, I'm not going to hit the big one immediately, which is about how to get this done with all these people who don't want to change. I'll start with a simple one, and then we'll warm up the questions and answers. So just a nice simple one to start with for you. In the focus formula, are the 3 C's all linked to subordinate of the 5 focusing steps? That's a question from Erwin.
Yeah, sort of. It depends what you mean by subordinate, and I think there's 2 views of what that means that I've heard articulated in the TOC community. So let me tell you how I interpret them. The find and optimize, the F and the O, and the upgrade apply directly to the bottleneck, and the 3 C's apply to the non-bottlenecks. And that's one way that a lot of people view the 5 focusing steps as subordinate is all of the stuff other than the bottleneck, but that may not necessarily be true. But so that's how I interpret it. And yeah, so F, O, and U are related directly to the bottleneck, and the 3 C's are the non-bottlenecks. But really, they're just meant to be a prompt to start you thinking. The best way to do it is to find the bottleneck and then just say, oh, we know where this bottleneck is. We kind of know how these things hang out together. Now let's brainstorm some ideas, get a list of things we might do, and then just pick and choose them. And you usually find that if you get stuck, the O, the C, and the C are useful little prompts. But often just brainstorming, once you've defined where it is, it gets so much easier.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we've got another one which has turned up, in fact, by many people. There's Robert Bolton, there's Darren, there's many people asked the question about how you set priorities. And do the developers choose the priorities? Do the managers choose the priorities? How do you set priorities? And somebody else pointed out, I think it was Albert, how do we make sure that when we've chosen those priorities, we get the coherent package that means we get to something good enough or whatever?
Yep. Okay, cool. So it's a collaboration, but the customer is normally the person that prioritizes. They might have all sorts of different titles, but the classic one would be product owner, but it could be a product manager. I just refer to them as a customer. They're the ones that decides. They kind of set the direction, but then that needs to be informed by some planning to go, well, does this actually make sense? If we did them in this order, technically, would that be really difficult? Would it be more sensible to do this one and then this one? And by the way, you might want that one there, but Bill, the guy that knows that area really well, he's off for a month. So why don't we move it around and do it later? So it's a collaboration. It's just good old-fashioned collaborative management between someone in the business side and someone or a team representing the IT side, architects, whoever needs to be involved, just to make the best decision. And there's so much stuff that needs to happen before it actually hits coders, developers, that it's really good to do just thinking up front before you go chucking stuff directly at the teams. And as for the coherent stuff, we have this term which has become butchered and it means something different now. The minimum viable product. I used to call that the commercially viable minimum product. And what it means is if I built this chunk of stuff here, would that be sensible to build all of that there, these bunches of features, and I slice and dice it and whatever makes sense. And this is the minimum chunk that I would want to put out and release. And if I had to launch that and it didn't go very well, I could live with it. So if you just do really small slices and put them out, sometimes you can, kind of like paint yourself into a corner historically, where you put stuff out that you wish you hadn't. So there's no easy answer apart from that. Just taking it iteratively and looking the very short term. What do we do next? What do we do next? What do we do next? Works in some situations, but planning collaboratively in a lot of situations is really, really helpful. And I think in my language there, I might be trying to avoid stepping on agile people's toes who just want to look and go, what's next, and not do that longer range planning. I think that's really important in some circumstances. And in some circumstances, you can just do stuff short term. Like if you take a long drive, you need to do more planning than if you're just driving to the shops and back.
There are, in fact, and the questions reflect that, there are two questions in one when we're talking about priorities, right? There's the fact that, are we just here to have fun and forget the customer, and we just decide every Monday morning what we're going to do for the week and forget everybody else? And I think that's what Robert was getting to, who chooses, the developers themselves or somebody else? And you alluded to that, saying, there's some less nice do what you want stuff in good Agile. The other one is how to maintain minimum viable product, or whatever you want to call it, this thing. And that's been a popular question by Darren in particular. So maybe you'd like to come back to that. I think it's, if I can rephrase it from my experience, agility with the idea that you're not quite sure what you're going to be doing and what the product is going to look like. Is that how can we maintain that idea of not knowing what one is doing with the notion of minimum viable product, and ensure that we get this thing. I think everybody understands what we're looking for, but I think a lot of people are having a lot of trouble getting it.
Right. So I use an analogy, and now there's this tension of not liking management in Agile and the long range planning that tends to skew this. So here's my view, which might offend a lot of Agile people who don't like management. I'm trying to put that nicely. I disagree with them. I think that management, project management, with product management, with architects, with customers, they all need to sit around together and go through a traditional-ish exercise of figuring out what's the smallest sensible thing that we could design and launch. Well, once you've got something that's running and it's been out for a while, you're going to do small incremental changes, and that's all right. But if you've got something you're starting with, you need to think of it kind of like a building. You've got there's a whole lot of work that you have to do when you start out that's below ground, building foundations, and no one even knows it. But before that happens, people have got to go and look and just check the ground to make sure that it's actually strong enough, that it's a good location to build, all of that kind of stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens way upstream before it needs to get to a development team who are writing code. So you've got the foundations, and then you're probably going to build the first floor, maybe the second floor, and by analogy, the management team with the technical specialists, whoever needs to be involved to come up with what is a sensible solution for that, they need to get together and think about it. What they don't need to do is design the color of the curtains on the 12th floor. They need to design stuff so it can be built upon and grow to whatever the minimum number of stories this building needs before it launches. But there are so many things that you don't need to get right. You do need to know how tall the building is going to be, roughly, because you're going to have a lift in the middle of it. So there'll be stuff like that that's core to it that you need to to get your head around. And that's just people sitting around designing things, designing architectures, going out, figuring out what the product does, all old-fashioned stuff. And most of that can happen and should happen, in my opinion, before it even hits the development team. Though some of the development team may be involved in that.
Okay, I'm still on purpose withholding the most popular question, which is the obvious one.
Am I Chinese?
Via Sunil's question, who's got a lot of votes that they want to hear. But yeah, and it's about, how you do this. How do you go from bad agile to good agile? I'll come back to that.
Mm.
There's another one which is just next on the priority list of popular questions, which is, why does agile increase IT capacity?
Okay. Let me give you just some examples. Right. So first example, if you've ever cooked toast and burnt it and then had to scrape the burnt bits off at the end of it, that's what waterfall used to be like. So that was what waterfall projects were. You do the first half where you get stuff and then you start testing it and you realize, oh, it's all burnt and you have to fix it. So effectively, if you can see my hands here, I'm not sure if this is a mirrored view.
Yeah, I'm getting. It's good. I'm just laughing too much.
So imagine here's build, and I'm not sure if this is left and right from your view or not, but here's build all of this stuff, analyze it, design it, code it, and then here we test it. But the test phase was really scraping burnt toast off. It should have been called the rework phase. So what we've done is taken that test activity and put it in parallel. And by doing that, we do the testing much more quickly. And we find stuff when it's much, much easier to fix it. And we just prevent an enormous amount of rework. So that's just basically taking those roles that were serial and just doing them in parallel. And it gets rid of a lot of bugs and it builds quality in. And that's an enormous bit of it. Another bit is, if you remember the little coffee cup analogy, this doesn't happen as much as it should do, but waterfall projects previously used to contain, in fact, if you've ever received a delivery in the mail and it's been filled with those little polystyrene packing peanuts, that waterfall projects used to include a lot of packing peanuts in them. Those little things there that were basically built in requirements that people might never ever need, but they used to put them in there just to keep the box full, and they were inside it. There'd be the magical stuff that they need. If I'm mixing my metaphors here, but the espresso is surrounded by a lot of fluff. So agile projects have got rid of a lot of that if they manage scope ruthlessly. If they don't manage scope ruthlessly, you'll have what I described, which is where they can just iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate and fritter away all the benefits of Agile by constantly changing. Kind of like a vehicle with its wheels stuck in mud, spinning and spinning and spinning. Lots of revving, but no actual progress. Okay. Another one is risk management, and this is really huge. If you're going to build one bit to start with, and then you're going to build things on stack on top of it, most of that stuff that you start with will find all sorts of bad problems early when it's easier to fix them. Whereas if you did the waterfall style of doing things, you wouldn't get them until you got to that scraping the burnt toast part. So, for instance, I'm going to get you in trouble here, Philip. Before we started this thing, we had a technical test, and we couldn't get on the test because Philip somehow killed the webinar. But if we hadn't had that test early, then we would have found it at a very bad time. But we managed to do it an hour before, solve it, and if I hadn't revealed it here, it was effectively, it made a very small problem. Out of what could have been a very bad problem if we hadn't done it. And it's the same with building stuff and making it potentially shippable, is that it finds problems early when they're easier to fix. Okay. And the other bit is that they just keep improving, that they just keep actively putting time aside to improve.
Yeah, I like that. And by the way, just looking at all the screens and stuff, Tom Baldwin typed in very early when you were starting to answer, Agile removes waste. And on listening to you, I think the proper sentence is Agile can remove waste. It's potential,
Yes.
right, to do it. But if
Yeah.
you start playing around by producing all sorts of things that nobody asked for, then you're creating waste. So good Agile removes waste. Bad Agile, between what it's improved and what it's destroyed, probably doesn't change that much, except you're all maybe having more fun than in the waterfall world. But okay. There's some other questions, but I wouldn't want to get to miss the big one before the end. We'll just see if in dealing with that there's any time left for the other ones. I mean, there's a big one which I'd like to hear about planning and Agile. But before we do that, can you try and address this mega question? Summarized, for instance, by Sunil, but it's had 11 votes, so this is the best question. And it's how you do it. And the question reads, do the primary challenges during Agile implementations emanate from misplaced business priorities? How important are culture and change management, with several people saying they have the same thing? And I'm assuming what they're all talking about is, seduced by the obvious common sense of what you're saying. How do you get it done? How do you change the organization?
Right. Okay. So this is going to sound like a. Actually, no, it's not a. It's not a cop out. It's So there's one bit. I go into that stuff in the some of that stuff in the course that we're doing in more detail. So I can't do it full justice here, but I'll try and give you the gist of it, and it's kind of straightforward. The first thing is that you learn about the idea of the U-shaped team, and then you ask yourself, what shapes our team? And for instance, the first question should be, inside the team, are the testers fast to give us feedback? Or are they maybe cutting corners because they don't have enough capacity to do their job? So now, I'm assuming that actually step 0 is just get the fundamentals of Agile right to start with. Just get them right. That will suddenly help you realize where the bottleneck is. It'll get rid of so much crap that clutters your mind and confuses you just by doing the basics of Agile. Not the basics, actually, the fundamentals, the good engineering, the producing well-engineered code, and getting a backlog set up. Don't worry about doing all the naked runs at lunchtime or anything like that. Do that later. Just get the fundamentals in. And then ask yourself, are the developers the bottleneck inside the team? In other words, are they getting stuff fed into them by the analysts that's been well thought through? Are they getting stuff that's been tested nice and quickly and thoroughly and properly by the testers? And if they're not, then you'll get an indication where your current bottleneck is, and you will want to move them to be the developers. And that's kind of straightforward, because that's what Agile teams just do over time. The next question is, up front, the people who are feeding stuff into the teams, the customer, do they have enough time to do that right? And if they don't, and trust me, everyone will say that. No, hang on, no, I'll ignore that line. More often than not, the developers, the customers won't have time to do their job properly. This is the product owners, the execs that are involved, those people that they're doing too much and they don't have enough time, they don't have enough capacity. So what you need to do is figure out how to coordinate their work that they do, so it's easy for them to find time, a little bit of extra time to do it. You need to collaborate with them so that you can take them solutions maybe and suggestions rather than just problems. You need to fundamentally make it easy for them. Make it easy for them to find a little bit of extra time. And because they're probably the genuine bottleneck, getting them 20% time has an enormous positive effect for the whole team. And it's just enormous. So a tiny improvement gets a big result in terms of the value of stuff that's being worked on and the amount of unnecessary rework that's been caused. So just get them a little bit of extra time, and then get them a little bit more time. And then once you've done all that, what's really important with the U-shaped team is that you figure out how to get everyone understanding how important it is, so that they protect it. Because it's one of those things that's really, really, really easy to get perfect, and you go, I have reached nirvana. And then you get a new customer take over, a new sponsor, new product owner, and they got another job, and suddenly the bottleneck's moved. So protecting it is really, really, really important. So that's it. But it's all about bottlenecks. But it's recognizing that there is a strategic bottleneck that is so much better than having a bottleneck in other places. And it's just occurred to me, there's something I forgot to mention, is that managers can be bottlenecks too. And oftentimes the thing that's actually missing to make this work is having people with the bridge building, collaborative management skills to actually protect and set up the team in a nice way. A lot of people, a lot of teams are actually light on management skills, and they don't think it's necessary. And at the same time, they moan because their customers don't pay them enough attention. If they had management skills themselves and the bridge building skills, and maybe this is what senior coaches and experienced Scrum Masters will do, they'll go try fix this. But the Scrum Master role was meant to be mostly internal to the team, and sometimes they come with management skills, but sometimes you just need managers. So I would actually say that the number one thing that we have to fix is building trust between the people that build the code inside the teams and the management and their customers, and you do that bit by bit by bit, and you build that relationship, and it makes everything that I've talked about so much easier. But don't do it. Try to do it all at once.
Okay, but and I'm just interpreting what I hope is the word is behind the word culture and change management in Sunil's question. You've talked about it. For some organizations, depends where they are in their agile journey, you do have to say that it's the end of the party, and there are rules, and don't forget your clients, and it's not up to you guys to choose what's the most fun thing to do this week. So there's some end of the party stuff in doing this.
Yeah, I have a nice current reality tree, which basically has that. For other people who don't know, it's a cause and effect tree that Ellie Goldratt came up with. It's just it's one of those thinking process tools, and it's pretty rough looking, but it basically shows that what you describe as the party, which I describe as they're having fun and enjoying it, but they're not being customer centric, and they're ignoring those customer requests for delivering stuff on time. It causes the customers and the management to have to get tough with them and to try and put more discipline on them. And it would just be so much nicer if Agile came with a set of tools of engaging with those people. So it came from the team. So rather than saying, hey, look, actually, we are really disciplined. Here's how you can help us. Here's how we can help you. If you guys need stuff on time, we don't know how to do that. Maybe we need a project manager, and we can work together and figure out how to do that. So the anti-management vibe, the pro-team, pro-product, anti-management, anti-money vibe creates this this animosity, and this is the ugly bit, and usually the animosity gets fought with more animosity, and so you need people who can build bridges and have those skills in there, and that really, ideally, if you can find someone who can come in and build the bridges between what the customer, what the CEO, what the managers want, and what the teams want, and resolve those conflicts, then that's when it all starts to work. But that's the trust bit.
Okay.
That, by the way, isn't included in the course, because I don't know how to teach that. I know how to do it.
Yeah, well, I think, having discussed it at other times, that one of the contributors to enabling trust is for people to share a happy story with happy people, happy clients and stuff. If you've got to the stage where everything is failing and there's a lot of stress and pressure and stuff, it's going to be difficult to get everybody back into the same room and trust each other. You need to get back to a stage where they can be at least mildly proud of what's going on to share a good story, right? Anyway, that's my point of view.
I agree.
Can I just ask another question around this, which is, do you have any opinion of why so often, as you said, the bottleneck in software development is in testing? Because as you know, in the world of physical development, so developing airplanes, pharmaceutical drugs, whatever, it is already testing that is the capacity constraint. But I don't think it's for the same reasons we find it in software development. Do you have any explanation for why it's testing so often?
So why it is in software development is it's largely historical in most places, which is that because stuff was built and then tested in two different phases. You know, the toast was cooked, and then it was burnt, and then it was scraped off. So build and then rework. Because it was separate, the size of the testing team didn't really seem to matter so much, and all it meant is that you had fewer testers. You just take longer to do testing, and so over time, as places tried to cut corners, that they would reduce the number of testers. So when you switch across to Agile, you've got the wrong mix for how if you want to work in parallel together at the same time, and then what happens is once you start doing Agile and you start getting a bit of movement, the quality goes up enormously, which means that the developers' capacity shoots up because they spend less time fixing things. But because you're releasing stuff more frequently, the workload on the testers to do regression testing, which is to say, well, you changed that lot there, but we also have to test that the whole thing still works, shot up.
Yes. So I'll stop you there because that could be a long discussion, because frankly, John Connor just typed in what I was smiling about, which is testing is part of development, not a separate testing. It's the role of development activity. I mean, if you read the Agile manifesto, this question shouldn't exist, should it? Because people were not meant to be testing separately and whatever. Anyway, I want to finish off. You've only got 3 minutes. I just want to hit one big one, which we haven't addressed in the questions enough. Planning and Agile. Can we give a date for anything, or is giving an end date good or bad Agile?
Right. So I think it's the thing that's missing from Agile, because part of the problem is that dates were always seen as being arbitrary. And then we've moved away, and a lot of people hate dates. They hate dates because it involves doing estimates, and they hate doing estimates. And you can understand this. There's been a lot of game playing and unpleasantness that's come with this. But if I've got, so I know a company that went broke because they were producing stuff for Apple, and they were 3 weeks late, and so they didn't make it into the iPhone whatever. And if they had hit that date, they would be a very successful company now, because they lost the contract that they had with them, and instead they're dead. So some dates are really, really important. Now, the lovely thing about dates is that if you have a person with project management skills, then you don't necessarily have to have the whole team doing all of the planning. You've just got to work in the way I described, building stuff up incrementally, planning out so you have a nice, safe buffer. You manage the scope so that you chase benefits, and you manage that really quite ruthlessly from a commercial point of view. And you have two things. You have a date that's out here in the distance that's nice and buffered, and you have a minimum product that you promise to deliver. And that there, you plan that out with some detail, the minimum, and then you go, well, if we got really unlucky, it's going to take that long, and that becomes your date. And then you are in a situation where you're probably going to get lucky and finish before that date, or you can finish the minimum on that date, and then add more features in. So basically what it is, you have a chunk of fixed scope, you have a chunk of variable scope, and then you use the variable scope as a buffer. But the thing that really has to happen is that you get your customer and your team and your managers all ruthlessly managing scope. Otherwise, you get the change and you can't hit your minimum. You get things added in and it grows and grows and grows. So you have to feel comfortable that you've got a good solid minimum, which is where we started in the questions, or otherwise it ends up being a mess. And by the way, John's wrong, sort of right. Testing can be a role.
Yeah, okay, well, it's time's up. And thank you very much, Clark, for this as usual great fun buffaloes and IT stuff. I love the way you talk about it all. And there was some questions about the masterclass that Clark is going to be running. Where to find it. Normally at the end of the webinar, the end screen will take you to the page which gives you a description and eventual registration on that. Otherwise you'll find it on the Marris Consulting website. The masterclass that starts on the 6th of October and has 2 sessions on the 6th and 13th with some preparation and some homework and stuff. So if you want to move in the direction that Clark is discussing, this is what Clark recommends for you to get it done and get to that good agile world. Okay, so thank you everybody. Thank you for all your participation. A lot of you in the middle of the night and all your questions and stuff. And well, we hope to see you soon in some form or another. Take care, stay safe, and have a nice day or a nice night wherever you are. Okay.
Thank you, Philip.
Right, take care.